And in the background is ABC News, Australia, uh, running 24 hours. And of course, a lot of the focus has been on this series of shootings and attacks that have been happening in Europe and the United States, and of course, terrible bombings in the Middle East and places like Iraq as well. And, I've been talking for so long about this technique that I call problem reaction solution, where you create a problem or lots of problems, you blame someone else for them, and then you get a reaction from the public saying, do something out of fear and anxiety. And then you offer the solutions to the problems you have covertly created, and these solutions advance the agenda for the world and where you want to take it. And whenever you see these shootings and attacks, there's always a solution offered or brought in either immediately or as a result of a little later. And so when there are terrorist attacks in Europe, it's we must increase the fight against terrorism, which means taking more freedoms away, which means bombing more innocent people in the Middle East often. And what we're seeing now is upping the ante of all that, creating events and horrific happenings to further push on this public perception of danger, of fear, of we must be protected. And, people who've not researched this year after year, decade after decade, might say, oh, that's all far-fetched and that can't be happening. They wouldn't do that. Well, in fact, they have been doing that decade after decade after decade. And this they also includes people like the networks in Britain and America, fronted up by George Bush and Tony Blair, who justified a mass slaughter of the innocent in Iraq on the basis of a monumental lie about weapons of mass destruction in that country. Now, if they will do that, then they will create terrorist attacks using mindless people who have no clue who their real masters are or who is really in control of their mind. And I'll get to that before I finish. They will do that because if they want to change society in a way that the public would massively resist if it was just openly offered, then they have to create circumstances which change that public perception so that resistance to how they want to push the world on to this global Orwellian fascist dictatorship state will be reduced. That resistance will be reduced to make it easier for them to bring about what they want. And that the public en masse would resist if they knew what was actually behind all this. And then there's another part of this, which is if there's a few of you, and as I've been pointing out all these years, the number of people in full knowledge of where this world is being taken and why, and who's actually behind it, is tiny compared with the target population. Tiny. And because of compartmentalization, the will of that few plays out through the system, different levels, with the vast majority of people who are working to play it out without any idea of what they're actually playing out or why, because they only know their little bit in the compartmentalized structure. They don't know how their bit connects to everyone else's bit to create a picture which can be clearly seen in terms of where this world is being taken. And all you have to do is look at the scale of surveillance, the scale of the disappearing privacy, to see that this is not about protecting us from terrorists. This is about creating this Orwellian global state that I've been writing about for so long, and others like Orwell and Huxley in Brave New World were also writing about with extreme accuracy, as it turns out. So this other side of this increasing, rapidly increasing number of terrorist attacks and shootings, etc., is because that tiny few have to manipulate a vast target population. And if that target population has unity and has harmony amongst itself, that's very, very much more difficult to do than if you play different factions of your target population off against each other. And when you kind of put the dots together, well, first of all, in the United States, with these shootings and attacks on policemen and police officers, and the way that police officers have treated black people, or white people too, by the way, but black people many, many times. And of course, that's come to the fore in the last few weeks. It's clear what's being done. The American society is being divided systematically. They want a race war. It's blatantly obvious. And if you can have a race war, a war in effect between one race and police, and one race and another race, or whatever, then you have the perfect situation for the few controlling the many. Because you have the target population fighting each other. And that allows you to justify things that otherwise could not be justified. Like more and more control, more and more surveillance, more and more Big Brother Orwellian state to meet the problem of the race war and the inter-community conflict. And then you move to Europe and you see the obvious. Look at Chancellor Merkel and what she did in Germany. The obvious decision to allow vast numbers of migrants to come into Europe in enormous numbers, not to protect them from war and conflict like those coming out of Syria. I mean, hallelujah to that. The West has created these conflicts on purpose, the same network that's behind what I'm talking about now. And so, of course, we should look after the refugees of these conflicts that this Western cabal has created. Of course. But that's not what happened. Vast numbers of others were allowed in at the same time who weren't fleeing from such things. And it was calculated. This is why German people were just shocked that Merkel could open the doors and say everybody in. Because what they want is, and there's many levels to why this has happened. And it all leads to the agenda I'm talking about. But one level of it is they want to create a situation of inter-race, inter-culture wars in Europe. And when you've got the head of the French police before Nice saying that France is on the brink of civil war, well, you can see how they're moving it on. And if people want to see where this is meant to lead in terms of the scale of imposition by the state upon basic freedoms and what is called democracy and free speech, then they should look at what is happening now in Turkey. Because this, quote, coup in Turkey, on the face of it, there was an attempt to remove the regime of the president, Erdogan. And that may well be true, but there's another way of questioning this too. And that's the incredible speed in which the Erdogan regime responded to it, clearly knowing it was all coming, and how they have since set about arresting thousands of judges and academics and teachers and others who were not supporters, basically, of the Erdogan regime. And how on earth can you justify arresting that number of people so soon after this, quote, military coup attempt? Where does the evidence come from in that short time to justify this massive number of arrests of people in the country? It doesn't. It was all pre-planned quite blatantly. As a result of this vacuous, vicious, insane man, Erdogan, who serves the interests of the West, not least by supporting ISIS in Syria, he's been given the opportunity, problem, reaction, solution, to purge all the people he thinks are against him. Because Turkey's no longer a democracy. It's a tyranny. It's a dictatorship. And it's being justified by Erdogan on finding a solution to the problem of the coup attempt. And in all these events, this is the reason why, if you read the alternative media as it dissects these official narratives of these terrorist attacks and shootings, why so many questions immediately start to arise. Why the official narrative has so often holes in it all over the place and contradictions in it all over the place. And why you see these patterns of repeating behavior, repeating patterns of action from one to the other. And when you see them all and you see the recurring patterns, it's quite clearly that these attacks, most of them anyway, are being played out to a blueprint, a repeating blueprint. Now, is that a coincidence? Of course not. Why do we see over and over again people that commit shootings and other attacks in the United States being connected to the FBI? Even the mainstream media in America, here and there, has pointed this pattern out. We are being subjected to a colossal mind game, because it is a mind game, because it has to be a mind game. When there's a few of you and you want to impose your will on the many, you can't impose it on 7+ billion people physically. There's too many of them and there's not enough of you. So what you have to do is you have to recruit from the target population and put them in uniform to impose your will on the target population, which is, of course, what happens, why so many psychopathic people are recruited into law enforcement. That's not to say they're all psychopaths, of course not. But there is no doubt a pattern of recruiting psychopaths into these positions who will carry out what you tell them without question and enjoy it. This is why there's so many outrageous things happen, like police officers shooting innocent people for no reason. And so if you don't have the numbers to physically impose your will upon everyone, then what you have to do is impose your will psychologically by getting the target population to think and perceive the world and self in ways that suit your agenda, which will get them to not only accept what you want to impose upon them, but demand it. Save me, protect us, this can't go on. And this mind game, which has been unfolding all this period through the 20th century, the present century and beyond, is now being ramped up like never before. And one of the reasons for that is that, as I know, going around Australia in the last few weeks with some more events still to go, there is without question an awakening going on of more and more people, including people within the system, to the point where they're seeing the world and what's happening in the world in a different way. They're starting to see the dots connect. They're starting to see that actually maybe this is not happening because of why we're told it's happening. This is very, very blatant to me. I mean, I've been doing this for 26 years. I've seen the transformation in the numbers of people who are going, whoa, maybe there's another way of looking at this. Never, never before has it been at the of the scale it is now, and we haven't seen anything yet. Now, this cabal know that this is going on, and they're trying to lock everything down as fast as possible and get this Orwellian state in as fast as possible. And so we're seeing the whole thing ramped up in terms of events unfolding to get people into fear and into giving their power away to be protected from what they've been manipulated to fear. The antidote to this is two things. One, Quo Bono, which translates as who benefits? Who benefits from me believing the official version of this event, whichever it is? So when these attacks and horrific happenings are reported, and the official version of what happened and why and who did it is reported, just ask the question every time, who benefits? Who benefits from me believing the official story I'm being given of this situation? And invariably, you will find that the only people who benefit are those that want to get people in fear, that want to justify more Orwellian legislation, that want to go in and bomb more innocent people, and want to push the world further along the road to this Orwellian global state of total control. So that is an antidote immediately every time these things happen and the official narrative is reported. But there's one other, and that's for everyone, whether black, white, Muslim, Jew, Christian, anybody, everybody, to realize that this conspiracy to enslave humanity in this Orwellian global state, which is unfolding so fast now, which is why more and more people are seeing it. It's not a conspiracy to enslave Muslims or middle-class Americans or black South Africans or Australians. It's a conspiracy to enslave all of us and our children and grandchildren, even more so. And we've got to start growing up and realizing that while we allow ourselves to be played off against each other in these divide and rule scenarios, without having the streetwiseness to ask the right questions when these things happen. Who benefits, for instance? If we go on buying these manufactured fault lines of divide and rule, then this Orwellian global state will happen. But it doesn't have to. If we realize that whatever the color of our skin or the nature of our culture, we are all in this together, because we together are that target population. Not one bit, not this bit, not that bit, all of us. And if we do those two things, we come together, we put down the fault lines, we create a simple situation and response called respect. Respect for another's culture, but the other's culture's respect, not to try to impose that culture on you, and vice versa. To respect someone's religion. I mean, I don't agree with any religion, but if people want to believe a religion, good luck to them, so long as they don't seek to impose it on anyone else. And if we can just find the maturity and the expansion of consciousness enough to live together and respect the differences, indeed celebrate them, then one of the major factors that allows this whole thing to unfold, divide and rule, disappears. And if we can find also the maturity and the expansion of consciousness enough not to accept the official story of everything. Sorry about the noise. The windows are open. Get some air in this place. I should be here in the sun. Anyway, I don't have to. I have it. A lovely place, but warm for me. But if we can find that maturity and that expansion of awareness enough to ask questions of every official narrative and see if it stands up, see if it goes through that filter of who benefits. If we can do these two things, put down the fault lines, ask the right questions, we will see so clearly, A, what's really going on and what's behind it, and B, we will remove the divide and rule that allows it to go on and go on pushing the world down this dark and dangerous road for freedom, which we've been going along for a long time. And because it's been going along a long time, now we're starting to see very clearly not just the bits and pieces being removed, but basic freedoms now being removed in a way that more and more people are finding hard to ignore and just look the other way and hope it isn't true. It is true. And we need to come together. It may sound trite, it may sound simple, but if we don't come together, if we go on being apart and played off against each other, we go on not asking the right questions when these events happen because, oh, he's a conspiracy theorist, then goodbye freedom. Not for one faction, not for one community, for everyone. Come on. Time to grow up and time to get a grip of this.